October 1st, 1960. Nigeria gains independence from Britain. 250 ethnic groups. 3 dominant regions: the Hausa Fulani North, the Yoruba West, the Igbo East. One nation, one flag, one dream. 7 years later, that dream would become one of the bloodiest civil wars in modern African history. This is not a story about a war. This is a story about what makes a war inevitable and who profits when it happens. To understand Biafra, you must first understand Nigeria's birth wound. In 1914, British colonial administrator Frederick Lugard merged the northern and southern protectorates of Nigeria into one administrative unit. Not because the peoples shared history, language, religion, or culture, but because it was cheaper to run one colony than 2. He called it the amalgamation. His Nigerian wife, Flora Shaw, had already given the territory its name years earlier, derived from the River Niger. Neither of them asked a single Nigerian. 3 nations forced into one. The north was vast, largely Muslim. Hausa Fulani dominated and governed through a system of indirect rule that preserved traditional Islamic emirate structures, conservative, hierarchical, deeply suspicious of the south. The west was Yoruba, sophisticated traders and city builders with centuries of urbanization behind them. Adaptable, outward-facing, politically complex. The east was Igbo, a deeply republican people with no kings, no centralized chiefs, governed instead by community consensus and individual achievement. Entrepreneurial, educated, ambitious. The Igbo embraced the missionary schools the British brought with a ferocity that would make them the most educated ethnic group in Nigeria within a generation. And that success, that ambition, would make them a target. When Britain prepared to leave Nigeria in 1960, they handed power to the northern political establishment, the largest region by population, the most politically conservative and the most amenable to British economic interests. The South, particularly the Igbo East, was already asking uncomfortable questions about who would control Nigeria's oil. Discovered in the Niger Delta in 1956, just 4 years before independence. The British didn't just draw borders. They decided who would win before the game began. What followed was a decade of democratic dysfunction, rigged censuses, electoral fraud, regional competition for federal resources. 3 ethnic groups and dozens of minorities, all pulling at the seams of a nation that had never chosen to be one. The seams gave way in January 1966. January 15th, 1966. 5 young military officers stage a coup. Their leader is Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nziogwu, an Igbo officer from Kaduna in the north, passionate, idealistic, genuinely nationalist. He believes he is saving Nigeria from the corrupt politicians who have been looting it since independence. His broadcast on Kaduna radio that morning is electric. He speaks of liberation, of decency, of a country reclaimed for its people. But the coup goes wrong almost immediately. The Prime Minister is killed. Several northern and western political figures are assassinated, but the Igbo leadership, notably the Prime Minister of the Eastern region, survives. Whether by accident or design has been debated ever since. What is not debated is how the North interpreted it. In the North, the January coup was not seen as a nationalist revolution. It was seen as an Igbo coup. Major General Johnson Agui Ironsi, the most senior military officer, takes power to stabilize the country. He is Igbo. He abolishes the regional structure and centralizes power, meaning the North, which had always dominated the federal government, suddenly loses its grip. Northern officers seethe. A counter-coup, July 1966. 6 months later, the North strikes back. On July 29, 1966, Northern military officers stage their own coup. Ironsi is captured, tortured, and killed. Igbo officers are murdered in their barracks across the country. The savagery is deliberate. It is a message. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, a Christian northerner from a minority group, young, mild-mannered, chosen precisely because he offended no one, is installed as head of state. But the worst is still to come, because now the violence moves off the military bases and into the streets. The pogroms, September and October 1966. In September and October 1966, coordinated massacres of Igbo civilians break out across northern Nigeria. Men are pulled from buses and killed. Women and children are hunted through markets. Igbo-owned businesses are burned. Churches are attacked. The violence is not spontaneous. Witnesses describe organized gangs moving with lists of names and addresses. The official death toll is disputed. Photographs of the dead circulate. They will be seen around the world. Over 1 million Igbo people flee the north and return east, traumatized, carrying their dead, carrying their stories, and carrying a question that had no peaceful answer. If we cannot be safe in our own country, do we have a country at all? The military governor of the eastern region is Lieutenant Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu, Oxford-educated, commanding, a true believer in Igbo survival. He receives the refugees, he hears their stories, and he begins to calculate. January 1967, a last attempt at peace. At the invitation of Ghanaian leader General Ankara, Nigeria's military governors meet in Aburi, Ghana, for a peace conference. Gowon and Ojukwu, two men who had trained together, who knew each other, sit across a table and negotiate. The Aburi Accord emerges. It is a loose confederation agreement. The regions will retain significant autonomy. The military will be reorganized along regional lines, and the federal government's power will be limited. Ojukwu accepts. The eastern region will stay in Nigeria. The country will hold together. They fly home, and then the federal side tears the accord apart. Nigerian civil servants and federal administrators, terrified of losing power to the regions, convince Gowon that the Aburi terms go too far. They draft a new decree that effectively abandons the Accord's core commitments. When Ojukwu reads it, he is not surprised. He had suspected it was coming, but he had needed the world to see that the East had tried. At Aburi, they built a bridge. Then the federal government blew it up and called it a negotiation. On May 30th, 1967, Ojukwu stands before the Consultative Assembly of Eastern Nigeria, packed with elders, chiefs, survivors of the massacres, mothers who had buried their children, and reads the proclamation. The Republic of Biafra is born. July 6, 1967. Nigeria's federal forces invade Biafra. Gowon promises it will be over in 48 hours. A police action, he calls it. A temporary correction. The world largely agrees. A secessionist breakaway cannot be allowed to stand. The great powers reason. Nigeria's unity must be preserved. It will last 2.5 years. The Biafran fighting spirit. The Biafran military, outnumbered and outgunned, fights with a ferocity that stuns the federal forces. Colonel Ojukwu has built a small but motivated army from the survivors of the North. Men who have already seen what defeat means for their people. They are not fighting for territory. They are fighting for existence. In a moment that shocks the world, Biafran forces under Lieutenant Colonel Banjo launch a daring counter-offensive westward, crossing into the Midwest region, briefly capturing Benin City and advancing to within striking distance of Lagos itself. For one brief, electric moment, Biafra nearly won the war before it had properly begun. The counter-offensive collapses. The federal forces regroup, reinforced with weapons from Britain and the Soviet Union. Two Cold War rivals united by their desire to keep Nigeria intact and its oil accessible. Britain supplies the federal government with weapons, ammunition, and diplomatic cover. The Soviets provide fighter jets. The French, with an eye on Biafra's oil and influence in West Africa, quietly support Biafra, providing weapons through the Ivory Coast and Gabon. The Nigerian Civil War becomes a Cold War proxy game played on the bodies of the Igbo, the blockade, the slow killing. As the federal forces squeeze Biafra's territory, Gowon's government makes a decision that will define how this war is remembered. They blockade Biafra by land, by sea, and eventually by air. Food cannot get in. Medicine cannot get in. International aid organizations, the Red Cross, Caritas, Joint Church Aid, are blocked, delayed, their planes turned back or shot at. The federal government argues the relief is sustaining Biafran resistance, and they are not entirely wrong. But what it is also doing is starving civilians. The first images reached the outside world in 1968. Photographs taken by a Swedish journalist. Children, Igbo children, with swollen bellies, stick-thin limbs, eyes too large for their faces, the unmistakable signs of kwashiorkor, the protein starvation disease that strips the body of everything but its hollow shell. These photographs change the world. They are the first time in history that television and international media bring a famine, a man-made famine, into the living rooms of the Western world in real time. People in Britain, France, America, Germany sit down to dinner and see Biafran children dying on their screens. The outcry is enormous. Rock stars, politicians, religious leaders, ordinary people, all demanding the war must stop. The federal government calls it propaganda. They are not entirely wrong about that either. Ojukwu's government weaponizes the imagery with skill, but the children are real. The dying is real. The starvation is a documented, deliberate strategic tool of war. Between 1 and 3 million people die in the Nigerian Civil War. The majority die not from bullets, but from hunger. Most of them are children under 5 years old. Inside Biafra, the resistance. Inside the shrinking republic, something extraordinary is happening. The Biafrans, isolated, blockaded, running out of everything, innovate. Engineers and scientists, many trained abroad, build their own weapons. They refine crude oil in makeshift refineries. They convert civilian vehicles into armored cars. They produce a rocket, the Ogbunigwe, from local materials. They develop a homemade radio station that broadcasts defiance across the airwaves. Chinua Achebe, the greatest African writer of his generation, serves the Biafran cause as a diplomat and propagandist. He crisscrosses Europe and America, meeting heads of state, making the Biafran case in the world's capitals. His presence gives the Republic an intellectual and moral legitimacy that guns alone cannot purchase. The Biafrans call it the land of the rising sun. They believe, genuinely, desperately believe, that they are building a new African nation, something just and self-determined, born from the fire of betrayal, and they are being destroyed. Asaba, the massacre that history forgot, October 1967. Federal troops enter the town of Asaba, a predominantly Igbo town on the federal side of the Niger River. What happens next is a war crime. Federal soldiers order the men and boys of Asaba to gather in the town square. They come, some in their Sunday clothes, singing, carrying white flags, believing this is a loyalty demonstration. Instead, federal troops open fire. Estimates suggest between 500 and 1,000 Igbo men and boys are killed in a single afternoon. Asaba is almost completely absent from Nigerian history textbooks. For decades, survivors were afraid to speak. The massacre remained a secret wound in a country that needed to believe in reconciliation. Some wounds are not healed by silence. They are just buried. And buried things do not stay still. By late 1969, Biafra is finished, or nearly so. The territory has been compressed from a region the size of Scotland to a desperate, overcrowded enclave. Relief flights, the brave, reckless nighttime operations run by church organizations and the Red Cross, are one of the only lifelines keeping millions alive. Federal MiG jets, piloted by foreign mercenaries, attack the relief aircraft. Some are shot down. Ojukwu is still broadcasting defiance, but the men around him know the mathematics. They have run out of time, territory, ammunition, and food simultaneously. On January 9th, 1970, Ojukwu flies into exile to Ivory Coast, which has been sheltering Biafra. He leaves his deputy, Philip Effiong, to negotiate. On January 12, 1970, General Philip Effiong announces Biafra's surrender. The war is over. The Republic of Biafra, 3 years old, ceases to exist. Gowon's victory broadcast contains words that will be quoted for decades. He says, "There are no victors, there are no vanquished." It is a remarkable statement. Whether he meant it, whether Nigeria meant it, is the question that haunts every year that follows. The federal government declares a policy of reconciliation, the 3 R's: reconstruction, rehabilitation, reintegration. But the reality on the ground is far harsher. Igbo bank accounts in federal banks are seized. Every Igbo person who had saved money in the Nigerian banking system, regardless of the amount, receives a flat payment of £20. A doctor's life savings, a trader's entire capital, £20. Properties in Lagos, Kano, Port Harcourt, properties Igbo families had owned and worked for before the war, have been abandoned property occupied by others, and the federal government declines to force restitution. Oil. The oil of the Niger Delta, historically the homeland of minority groups who had suffered under both Nigerian and Biafran rule, flows into the Nigerian federal treasury. The eastern region that produced it sees little return. The silence around Biafra. For decades, the Nigerian government does not commission a full investigation into the war's atrocities. No war crimes tribunal is convened. The Asaba Massacre goes unacknowledged. The starvation deaths go uninvestigated. The foreign powers who armed both sides face no accountability. Chinua Achebe, who had served Biafra, spends years in exile and semi-exile, eventually returning to Nigeria. In 2012, 2 years before his death, he publishes There Was a Country, his memoir of the Biafran War. It causes enormous controversy in Nigeria because it says the things Nigeria has agreed not to say. A country that cannot speak honestly about its worst wounds cannot heal them. It can only pretend. The Igbo, despite, or perhaps because of, their losses, throw themselves into reconstruction with characteristic intensity. Within a generation, they are again among the most educated and entrepreneurial people in Nigeria. Resilience as a survival strategy, memory as private grief. But the structural grievances that caused the war, control of oil revenue, political marginalization, the competition between Nigeria's regions and ethnic groups for federal resources are never truly resolved. They deepen, they change shape, and they reappear. The movement for the actualization of the sovereign state of Biafra, MASOB, IPOB, the indigenous people of Biafra. These movements, still active in the southeast today, are the Biafran War's direct descendants. Not the war itself reborn, but the unfinished business of it. Here is what the history books often leave out. The Biafran War was not simply a conflict between Nigeria and the Igbo. It was a tragedy that killed people on every side. Federal soldiers, many of them barely adults, many of them from minority groups with their own complicated relationship to this war, died in enormous numbers. Minority groups in the Niger Delta, who had been minorities under both Nigeria and Biafra, tried to survive the crossfire. Yoruba Nigerians, who had opposed the war politically, were silenced by military rule. Everyone in Nigeria paid a price for this war. The price was not equally distributed, but it was paid by all. Nigeria today is still, in many ways, the country that Biafra exposed. The largest black nation on earth, enormous wealth, the largest economy in Africa, and enormous dysfunction. A federal system in which the oil of the South still flows into a central government that the Southeast believes does not represent it. A country of 220 million people, the most Africans under one flag, still negotiating the terms of being one nation. The question Biafra asked has never been answered. It has only been deferred. Between 1 and 3 million people, most of them children, most of them starved, in a war that the world watched, debated, fundraised around, and then moved on from. They deserved better than a footnote. They deserved better than silence. And Nigeria, all of Nigeria, deserves a reckoning with what happened in those 2.5 years. Because a country that cannot look its own history in the eye is not a country that has healed. It is a country that is still bleeding, just too quietly for the world to hear.